You likely did something last night that, if you described it to an alien species, would sound like a form of voluntary madness. You lay down on a soft surface, closed your eyes, and deliberately surrendered consciousness for roughly 8 hours. You became paralyzed. Your muscles went slack, your awareness dissolved, and for a third of your entire existence, you were effectively offline, vulnerable, defenseless, and completely unaware of the world around you. To you, this is just sleep. It's a necessity, a minor frustration when it doesn't come easy, or a guilty pleasure when you sleep in on a weekend. But if you step back and look at this behavior from a purely strategic standpoint, it is one of the most dangerous things any animal can do. Every moment you spend unconscious is a moment a predator could find you, a fire could surround you, or a rival could take what's yours. Natural selection is ruthless. It eliminates anything that wastes time, anything that creates vulnerability without payoff. And yet, after 3.5 billion years of relentless optimization, evolution did not eliminate sleep. Not even close. It made it mandatory. Every animal with a nervous system, from fruit flies to blue whales, from jellyfish to elephants, sleeps in some form. There is no creature that has evolved its way out of this requirement. That is not just unusual, that is deeply, profoundly strange. It means that whatever sleep is doing, it is so unimaginably important that evolution decided the risk of being eaten alive in the dark was an acceptable price to pay. We are all prisoners of a biological demand so ancient and so powerful that 5 billion years of survival pressure couldn't find a workaround. And the most unsettling part? We still don't fully understand why. But if sleep is so dangerous, so costly, and so universal, what could possibly justify its existence in the first place? And more importantly, when did our ancestors first realize that something was happening in the dark that they couldn't see? To understand why we sleep, we have to travel back over 600 million years to a time before brains existed at all. The earliest multicellular organisms in the Precambrian seas already exhibited cyclical patterns of activity and rest. These weren't conscious decisions. They were dictated by something far more fundamental: the rotation of the Earth itself. Every 24 hours, the planet turns, and with it comes a cycle of light and dark, heat and cold, safety and danger. According to research by circadian biologists like Dr. Joseph Takahashi and Dr. Michael Rosbash, who shared the Nobel Prize in 2017, the molecular clock that governs sleep is written into nearly every cell in your body. It's not just in your brain. It's in your liver, your skin, your gut. You are not one clock. You are a symphony of billions of tiny clocks, all ticking in approximate unison, all answering to the ancient rhythm of a rotating planet. This internal timekeeper, the suprachiasmatic nucleus in your hypothalamus, is essentially a fossil of Earth's rotation embedded in your flesh. You carry the memory of every sunrise and sunset that ever was inside your skull. But here's the catch. The clock tells you when to sleep. It does not tell you why. The circadian rhythm is just the schedule. The actual event of sleep, the shutdown of consciousness, the paralysis of the body, the wild hallucinations of dreaming, that is something else entirely, something far more radical. We don't just rest, we transform. But if the clock was set millions of years before humans existed, what exactly happens during those lost hours that makes them worth dying for? The answer lies not in the darkness of the night, but in the fluid that surrounds your brain. For decades, scientists assumed the brain simply rested during sleep, like a computer in standby mode. But in 2013, Dr. Macon Nedergaard at the University of Rochester discovered something that fundamentally changed our understanding of why we lose consciousness every night. She found the glymphatic system, a network of channels that opens up in the brain specifically during deep sleep. When you're awake, your brain cells are swollen with activity, pressed tightly together. But when you fall into non-REM sleep, those cells shrink by up to 60%, and cerebrospinal fluid rushes through the newly opened gaps like a tide sweeping through a city's streets. This fluid carries away metabolic waste, including beta amyloid, the toxic protein that accumulates in the brains of Alzheimer's patients. Your brain, in other words, is not resting when you sleep. It is cleaning itself. It is flushing out the molecular garbage that builds up with every thought, every decision, every moment of consciousness. You produce neural waste every second you are awake, and the only way to remove it is to shut down the entire system and run the cleaning cycle. This means that every hour you spend awake is an hour you are slowly poisoning your own brain, and every hour you spend asleep is an hour your body spends desperately mopping up the damage. You are a machine that poisons itself by running and can only be saved by turning itself off. But if the cleaning cycle explains deep sleep, it leaves the strangest part of the night completely unexplained. What about the part where you hallucinate? We find the answer in REM sleep, and it is written in the electrical storms of a dreaming brain. Roughly 90 minutes after you fall asleep, something extraordinary happens. Your brainstem sends a signal that paralyzes your voluntary muscles from the neck down. Your eyes begin to dart frantically behind your closed lids, and your brain erupts into activity patterns that are nearly indistinguishable from full waking consciousness. You are dreaming. Dr. Matthew Walker, a neuroscientist at UC Berkeley and author of Why We Sleep, describes REM sleep as a form of overnight therapy. During dreaming, your brain replays the emotional events of the day, but it does so while the stress chemical noradrenaline is completely shut off. This is the only time in your entire 24-hour cycle when your brain is free of this anxiety-triggering molecule. You are essentially re-experiencing difficult events in a safe neurochemical environment, stripping the emotional charge from memories while preserving the informational content. This is why you can wake up after a bad day and feel that the sharp edge has been taken off your pain. Your dreaming brain performed emotional surgery on you while you were unconscious. But here's what makes this truly unsettling. You have no control over this process. You cannot choose what your brain repairs, what it discards, or what it amplifies. Every night, you hand the keys of your consciousness to a process you cannot direct, and you wake up as a slightly different person than the one who fell asleep. You are being edited in the dark by your own biology, and you have no say in the revisions. But if our brains are performing this critical maintenance every night, when did our ancestors first begin to understand sleep as something more than just an absence? We find the first clues roughly 400,000 years ago at a site called Schöningen in Germany. Here, archaeologists discovered not just the famous wooden spears of Homo heidelbergensis, but evidence of organized sleeping arrangements. Compressed earth and charred remains suggesting that groups of early humans slept together around maintained fires. This is significant. It tells us that by this point, our ancestors understood sleep not as passive downtime, but as a vulnerable state that required collective protection. They built the world's first bedrooms, not rooms with walls, but circles of trust. Dr. David Sampson, an evolutionary anthropologist at the University of Toronto, has studied what he calls the human sleep paradox. Compared to other great apes, humans sleep significantly less, roughly 7 to 8 hours versus the 10 to 14 hours seen in chimpanzees and orangutans. But our sleep is far more efficient. We spend a much higher percentage of our sleep time in deep and REM stages. Sampson's hypothesis is that when our ancestors moved to the ground and began sleeping around fires in cooperative groups, the safety of the collective allowed them to compress their sleep into a shorter, more intense package. We traded quantity for quality. We became the species that sleeps the least but dreams the most. The campfire was the first sleep technology, a circle of light that held back the predators and allowed our brains to plunge deeper into the restorative stages of unconsciousness. We didn't just master fire for cooking, we mastered it for dreaming. But if the campfire was the first sleep technology, how did sleep transform from a biological necessity into a cultural obsession? As we move forward into the Bronze Age and the first civilizations, sleep became a territory of the gods and the dead. In ancient Mesopotamia, sleep was understood as a temporary visit to the underworld. The Sumerians believed that during sleep, the soul partially detached from the body and wandered in a realm between life and death. Dreams were not hallucinations. They were messages, prophecies delivered by supernatural beings to a temporarily receptive mind. In ancient Egypt, temples called sleep temples or incubation chambers were built specifically for the practice of divine dreaming. The sick would come to these temples, undergo purification rituals, and then sleep on sacred ground, hoping that the god Imhotep or Serapis would visit them in a dream and reveal the cure for their illness. Priests would then interpret the dreams and prescribe treatments accordingly. This was, in a very real sense, the first form of psychotherapy, using the altered state of sleep to access information the waking mind could not reach. In ancient Greece, this tradition continued with the Asclepians, healing temples dedicated to Asclepius, god of medicine. Patients would sleep in the abaton, the sacred dormitory, and report their dreams to priest-physicians who would translate the symbolic language of the unconscious into medical advice. Hippocrates himself acknowledged the diagnostic value of dreams. This period marks the beginning of sleep as a professional concern. It was no longer just something that happened to you. It was something that could be managed, interpreted, and prescribed. Sleep had moved from the campfire to the temple, from survival to civilization. But if we've spent thousands of years trying to understand sleep, why does the simple act of closing your eyes at night still carry such deep, unshakable power over your sanity? This brings us to the present day, where the biology of sleep remains exactly as it was millions of years ago, but our relationship with it has become catastrophically dysfunctional. We still have that ancient clock ticking in our hypothalamus, still calibrated to the rotation of a planet. And because of that, we still have to submit to the nightly shutdown. But think about what happens when you can't sleep. It's not just tiredness. After just 24 hours without sleep, your cognitive function deteriorates to the equivalent of being legally drunk. After 36 hours, you begin to experience microsleeps, involuntary shutdowns of consciousness lasting a few seconds that you cannot prevent. After 72 hours, you begin to hallucinate. After 11 days, the documented world record set by Randy Gardner in 1964, the mind begins to fragment in ways that resemble acute psychosis. This cascading collapse is not a gradual decline. It is your brain issuing increasingly desperate emergency signals that the cleaning cycle must run, that the emotional processing must occur, that the consolidation of memory cannot wait. Sleep deprivation doesn't just make you tired, it makes you insane. And yet we live in a civilization that has declared war on sleep. The invention of artificial light, first gas, then electric, shattered the ancient contract between humans and the night. For the first time in evolutionary history, we could choose to ignore the darkness. And we did. The average person today sleeps 1.5 to 2 hours less per night than their great-grandparents did. We have created a 24-hour economy that treats sleep as an obstacle to productivity, a weakness to be overcome. CEOs boast about sleeping 4 hours a night. Students pull all-nighters as a badge of honor. We have collectively decided that the most critical biological process our brain performs is negotiable. But it is not. The World Health Organization has classified night shift work as a probable carcinogen. Studies by Dr. Walker and others have shown that sleeping less than 6 hours a night increases your risk of heart attack by 200%, your risk of certain cancers by up to 50%, and accelerates cognitive decline by years. Every major disease killing people in developed nations, Alzheimer's, cancer, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, obesity, depression, has a direct causal link to insufficient sleep. We are not just tired, we are slowly killing ourselves by refusing to turn off. We are the only species that deliberately deprives itself of sleep. No other animal does this. No rat, no dolphin, no migrating bird voluntarily stays awake when sleep is available. We are the only creature that has to be convinced that unconsciousness is necessary. We are the only animal that fights its own off switch. And we are paying for this rebellion with our minds, our bodies, and our lives. But as you lie in bed tonight, consider the sheer strangeness of what is about to happen. You will lie still, your muscles will lock, your consciousness will dissolve into a series of vivid, irrational hallucinations that you will mostly forget by morning. Your brain will flush itself with fluid, strip the emotional weight from your memories, and consolidate everything you learned today into long-term storage. You will emerge tomorrow as a slightly different person, rebuilt, reorganized, and edited by a process that predates every thought you've ever had. You did not choose this. You cannot opt out. You are subject to a nightly death rehearsal that has been mandated by 600 million years of evolutionary law. And the most unsettling part is that you will never, ever experience it directly. Sleep is the one thing you do every day that you can never witness yourself doing. It is the black box of human existence, a mandatory voyage into nothingness from which you return changed, refreshed, and none the wiser. Consider the staggering implications of that fact. For a third of your life, you do not exist as a conscious being. You vanish. The person who falls asleep is, in a meaningful sense, not the same person who wakes up. Your brain has been physically altered, your synapses pruned, your memories reshuffled. You wake up each morning as an edited draft of yourself, a revision made by a process you cannot observe, cannot direct, and cannot refuse. You are a creature that must die a little every night just to stay alive. If you feel the pull of exhaustion right now, if your eyelids are growing heavy and your attention is starting to drift, don't fight it. You are feeling the weight of 600 million years of evolutionary necessity pressing down on your consciousness. You are feeling your body's demand to begin the cleaning, the processing, the rebuilding that can only happen in the dark. You are feeling the oldest command your biology can issue, older than hunger, older than thirst, older than desire itself. You are feeling the call of the void that keeps you whole. And if you lie awake tonight, staring at the ceiling, unable to surrender, know that you are not just suffering from insomnia. You are in rebellion against the most fundamental biological contract your species has ever signed. You are an animal refusing to turn itself off, and your body will eventually force the issue. Because in the end, sleep always wins. You cannot outlast it. You cannot outsmart it. You can only delay it, and every hour of delay comes at a cost that will be extracted from your future self with interest. So close your eyes. Let the paralysis take your limbs. Let the hallucinations come. Let the fluid sweep through the corridors of your brain and carry away the poison of the day. You are not losing time. You are investing in the only maintenance cycle that keeps you sane, keeps you sharp, and keeps you human. You are performing the same nightly surrender as the first Homo erectus, who fell asleep beside a dying fire on the African grasslands. You are obeying the same ancient rhythm as the jellyfish pulsing in the Precambrian deep. You are doing the one thing that every conscious creature on Earth must do. You are choosing to stop. And in that stopping, in that terrifying act of daily dissolution, lies the entire secret of what it means to be alive. The truth is stranger than we like to admit. If you were kept awake forever, if some cruel experiment removed your ability to lose consciousness, you would not simply grow tired. You would disintegrate. Your immune system would collapse. Your brain would fill with waste. Your emotional regulation would shatter. You would hallucinate, seize, and eventually die, not from any external threat, not from hunger or disease, but from the simple, terrible accumulation of being awake. You would be killed by consciousness itself. You are not a machine that can run indefinitely. You are a machine that was built to break down and rebuild, over and over, night after night, until the night finally comes when the rebuilding doesn't happen and the machine goes quiet for the last time. Every morning you wake up is a small resurrection. Every night you fall asleep is a small death. And between those two events, between the surrender and the return, lies everything you are and everything you will ever be. So keep your beds warm and your rooms dark. The ancient cycle is still turning, and your brain is waiting for the signal to begin its nightly work. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the hidden architecture of the night. If this look into the terrifying necessity of human unconsciousness has changed the way you think about closing your eyes tonight, I'd love to hear about it. What's the strangest dream you've ever had that felt more real than waking life, and what do you think your brain was trying to process? Let's talk about it in the comments. And if you want to keep exploring the hidden biological and historical forces that shape every moment of your existence, consider subscribing. There are so many more stories hidden in the things we take for granted, and I'd love to have you along as we uncover them. Until next time, take care of yourselves, and don't fight the dark. Your brain knows what it's doing, even if you never will.